The Idaho legislature revisits bill restricting minors' access to harmful material. This comes by several sources. In a move that is bringing old wounds back to light in the Idaho State House, a bill restricting minors' access to materials deemed harmful has been reintroduced. House Bill 384, also known as the Children's School and Library Protection Act, is a revised version of last year's vetoed bill with some tweaks. It aims to restrict access to materials deemed harmful to minors in public and school libraries. This includes content that depicts nudity, sexual conduct, or sadomasochistic abuse. The bill would allow parents and guardians to sue libraries if such materials are made available to minors, with potential fines of $250 per violation. The bill has sparked a heated debate. Proponents argue it is necessary to protect children from inappropriate content, while opponents see it as a veiled attempt at censorship and an unnecessary financial burden on libraries. During a nearly 2-hour public hearing, librarians and educators voiced concerns about the bill's vague language and practical challenges of implementation, such as the need for renovations and additional staff to monitor adult-only sections. As the bill moves to the House floor for a vote, as of recording this, it is clear that Idahoans are left weighing the implications of this legislation. Will it serve as a protective measure for minors, or will it infringe upon the freedom of information and lead to a slippery slope of censorship? Which, me and you, listener, have talked about this in the past. Granted, it's being reintroduced with a couple changes. So going through kind of some of the changes on it, there isn't a ton. As I said, one of the things that has changed, though, is they've added the definition of schools. Now, you might say, why need that definition? I know last year when I was hearing the discussion, there were people that were raising some concerns that it wasn't being clear about what libraries or stuff would be affected. And it was like, oh, no, it's going to be private. It's going to be all the places that have books, and you're going to have these sections everywhere, and blah, 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 a bunch of fear-mongering. And so they've added a section, point 11 of section 1 of the bill, meaning, quoting here, schools, meaning any public or private school providing instruction for students in kindergarten through grade 12. So that clarification is in there. One of the things they did remove, and I heard this was another contention on it getting passed and stuff, because people were arguing this was too vague, that there was a definition here of, different sexual material and stuff, and they removed according to prevailing standards in the adult community with respect to being with substance for minors. That has been removed, I guess, for a little bit more of clarification's sake. And then they changed the level of the fine has changed, which last year Governor Little vetoed it partly on that position that he said it would cause a bounty system for the libraries where people would be going to look for violations or test them for violations, and didn't want that to be encouraged. So originally I think it was like $1,000 per infraction, but now it's been moved down to like $250 per violation.
That makes sense. So here's the thing that I've seen with anybody who argues the other side of materials in school libraries, because your main talking points that you run across are this: well, banning books is bad. And then from there you go on to talk about books like Gone with the Wind or, Tom Sawyer.
Things that they're educational, but they have some possibly risque scenes.
Sure, risque or language or depictions of slavery or, something. And so that's the main talking point, is like, wow, they're getting rid of those books. It's so bad. But then if you actually talk to these people and you bring up the books that are actually in our school libraries and you're saying, look, these are the books we're trying to get rid of, most intelligent human beings are going to look at that and be like, well, yeah, that shouldn't be in the library. Why is that in there? It's like, I know, that's the problem. That's what we're trying to solve here. And so I think when it comes to people supporting or not supporting this bill, I think it's more a public perception thing.
Right. And, kind of springboarding off what you're saying there, which is very true. But really, if you read this bill, I really do ask you, if you're against it or you're for it, really please do read it so you are educated on what you're talking about, especially if you're going to be arguing about it. This bill goes to great lengths to define a lot of elements that it's not going to spear into, oh, well, then kids can't have educational books to learn about human anatomy. No. This bill isn't going to hit that. I mean, just going through this, It goes through a whole list of definitions if we're going through this. It defines what a minor is, nudity. It also goes through and says one of those things is also sexual conduct. I need not explain what those are, but it goes into great detail of talking about what that is. It doesn't sit here and say, oh yes, anytime that someone is in any form naked or we refer to the human form, it must be in a secured section. No, it's not talking about that. It's talking about things that adults do. A lot of the material that this is aimed at trying to get of is really sexually explicit content that shouldn't be in our public libraries.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I appreciate that this bill is as specific as it is, and that they've defined things the way they have. Because yeah, if we're going to be vague about these things, and this could apply to all libraries everywhere, sure, I could see that being a problem. Now, do I think some of these materials even should belong in libraries anyway? No, I really don't. But I can understand there wanting to be a distinction. This bill is specifically for schools
and public.
Great. Let's specify it. Yes, for our public
which they're taking tax
schools.
dollars, which
Great.
then the voters should have a say in what is there or not in a democratic system.
Right, which that brings me back to a point I've argued for, is whenever the government offers you money, you have to understand that the government has strings attached to this money. These are strings that the government is attaching to their money. They're providing money to the public schools. The public schools are now beholden to the government for what the government has to say about it. So here you go, strings on public schools.
Right. I mean, and also I would say one of the strongest arguments, because we've gone after the more weaker one, one of the stronger ones that's given, and I think us as conservatives, for me anyways, do struggle to answer to it, is saying people will sit there and say, well, you're trying to censor. That's censorship. They burn books in Nazi Germany, right? Which, if we're going with the definition of censorship, I have it here on hand just for the sake, it is the practice of suppressing or restricting speech, public communication, or other information on the basis that such material is considered objectionable, harmful, sensitive, or, quote, inconvenient, end quote. Which, that's true. There are certain times that you can censor unjustly, that you can take certain people in the sense of free speech, that you have the right to, in a sense, express your ideas if they don't pose an immediate threat to someone, right? But on the flip side, I would like to make the argument, and I think it's a no-no place in conservatism sometimes, that there's also such a thing as good censorship. That if there are things, in a sense, that aren't prudent, that aren't good, right? These are things that we have a vested interest in a way to, I would say, keep away from society, just like a drug. That if there's a drug that has a 90% addiction rate, right? And out of that 90% of people, obviously 90% of them aren't going to get off that drug. And then you say from that percentage over the course of time, 80% of them are going to die from it. Should we ban the drug? Should we censor the drug? Well, yeah, we should. Ideas can be that way too, that they can destroy families, and it's not good. Now, I could totally see the argument if this was for banning it from adults as well, which we could go into that later, but I really want to focus on the fact of why, in this specific case, it's a good thing, because children, what do parents do? Parents are supposed to shield and nurture their children to eventually become adults. Part of that is that parents censor all the time. And that's a good thing. You're not being a good parent if you don't censor the content and the speech and things your children do, because they don't know better. They're children. This bill is specifically talking about children and the access for minors. And so I really think the censorship argument falls apart really badly at that point when you're getting into that point for minors.
Yeah, I would agree.
And also, I don't want to toot my horn. You can go look at this, but I had a conversation on Twitter with a gentleman about pornography this last week. And in that discussion, we were kind of going back and forth about, well, where in the United States does the United States have the authority, right, to try to legislate on what is right or wrong, right? And one of the final discussions as we got, because obviously as a Christian, I believe that all authority comes from God. If you want to go look that up, I think that's Romans 13 where it starts talking about that. And so be it our country, be it the U.S. Constitution, it's all subservient to that thing. And he eventually asked me, well, okay, Cool. You said all those points, but what does the U.S. Constitution say? And in the very first part, it says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." And the point I gave is, if we allow pornography to be seen by children, does that promote domestic tranquility? Does that provide a common defense for the weak,
Nope.
which is children and women? Does that promote general welfare? And does that secure a blessing of liberty for ourselves and for our future generation? That's what it's talking about by posterity. I would say no. And so we should have every right at a state level, at a personal level, and at a national level to censor things like this for children.
Yeah, I read that exchange with you between you two, and I agree wholeheartedly.
Anywho, pornography, be it written or on the internet, is bad. And I think this is a good bill. But if you disagree, please reach out to us.